Get started with the City Council staff report by Deborah A. Owen.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. A couple of things. One about tonight's agenda, items 4, 5, and 6. After reviewing with leadership, we'll probably read those together as one for discussion. You are setting a date of hearing for those, and the vote will be next week on June 21st. But at the request of Public Works Director Mark Cotter, he would like to have those read in one time. And then also, as prepared for you per request, there are some notes about the advice and consent and how those items tend to come before council. So that's for you for open discussion. And then also, Councilmember Greg Jameson had wanted me to prepare and give handouts of the past CIP budgets. As you know, we'll get the CIP budget from the mayor very soon, and so we have some spreadsheets for you to look at and review. And I didn't want to hand those out and miss whatever else you have, but they are here, and at the end of tonight's meeting you can come and grab a couple of them. So thank you very much. That's it.
Any questions of Deborah? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Mayor Huther. I see Mayor's in the house.
Thank you, Councilor Jensen. Thank you. I'll be very brief. The CIP budget. Could you put on your microphone, please? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. The CIP budget presentations are going real well. We'll be ready to present that to all of you. In fact, what we'd like to do is actually present the information to you ahead of time, so you've got an opportunity to review it prior to the official presentation. And I think that's only fair. Same thing will apply with the operating side of the budget. That's also going well. We'd like to get that to you as well, to give you some time to scrutinize it a little bit, answer questions of Gene or any of the department heads. Again, as I've tried to relay, I'd like you to have as much access to those department heads as possible. You can even ask them about maybe some of the challenges that they've had during the budgeting process. And then last but not least, of course, there was an announcement made today. For those of you who don't know, I did offer 4 changes to the department heads here in city government. That includes the city attorney, central services, the public health department, along with the community development department. You'll be hearing more about that. 2 of the 4 will need the advice and consent of these good people up here of City Council, and we'll work through that process. But Councilor Jameson, thanks for the opportunity.
That was brief. You're getting better. Any questions of the mayor? Yes, Jim. Councilman Intiman.
I do have a question, Mayor. I was wondering, I briefly talked to Gene at one point in time, but with the budget coming upon us in real short order, and some of us are fairly new to the process, needless to say, I think it'd be very useful if we might impose on Gene to possibly give us a City Budget 101 program. I think we had talked about that once before, and I think that would be very useful.
Jim, you and I coming from a business background, that will be useful. It is. There are some things that you do in city government finances that we don't do in private business or in corporate America, whether it's Gene or Tom Huber or any of his team. I think a Business 101 class in terms of the budgeting process would prove beneficial, at least to the 4 new city council members. So, Gene, with your permission, we'll coordinate that. Well, again, whether it's Gene or Tom or anybody, it's a great idea.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we'll move on to other items here. Committee reports. We'll start with the audit. Rich is going to present a couple of items later. That'll bring up audit committee up to speed. Fiscal committee, I know we ran late last week. And do we have a report on the fiscal committee?
No report, sorry.
Okay, and land use committee?
No report, Mr. Chair.
Bob, if I could add, I know that we're trying to reach Meredith Larson. He contacted me back on, he is the chairman of the Planning Commission, yes, to get together to talk about the rezoning issues that we've talked about before. He is unable to make the land use committee meeting date, but he's going to try to find somebody else who could come in his place from the Planning Commission. So we're still working on that, but know that it might change.
Very good. Thank you for your efforts, Mr. Chair.
Chairman Jameson, if I may.
Sure.
With that particular committee, As you've heard over the last couple of weeks, there's been more and more talk about trying to find a way to make the zoning requirements more open, more transparent, maybe even longer so that people in a certain neighborhood are notified more. If you have recommendations that you've learned about or feel would be necessary, if you can get those to Mike Cooper as well, I sincerely, Mike and his team are going to begin working on that. We've got to make changes, and you can certainly help us with that.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you.
Litz.
I think Mr. Cooper may be able to add some serious comment to that conversation as well, because he's been around the business for a long time, and I think I'd look forward to seeing what Mr. Cooper himself had.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Public Services Committee.
Public Services Committee will be meeting after the informational here today. On our agenda is affordable housing, and we've also got the referred ordinance amending Section 12.5-35 for the compliant procedure for the Board of Ethics. And those will be the items we'll be discussing today.
That should be an exciting meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilor Litz.
Did you say compliant or complaint? I guess if we switch two letters around, it changes.
Complaint. I
Okay, very good.
apologize on that.
Any questions of Kenny on that committee meeting? Okay, now we'll move into City Council open discussion. Anybody have anything they'd like to discuss? Not seeing any. Well, Councilor Erpenbach.
One thing that we talked about just informally prior to swearing in was a possible retreat for the council, and I guess I'd like to put that back on our table, that perhaps that's something that should be on our agenda. The other question I have then is that I love the idea of the City Finances 101. Is that going to be, can we do that during a 4 o'clock meeting as well, so that it can be, broadcast and all of that? That would be very helpful, I think, not only for us, but for the community as well.
Well, I think so. If the rest of us would like to, we sure could. Gene, you don't mind, probably? Okay, great.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I just want to make sure, though, that we give ourselves adequate time. It might be more than an hour's meeting if there's a lot of questions and stuff that we have. I just want to ensure that we have an opportunity to make sure that we ask questions.
Okay, we'll plan ahead for that.
Yeah, that's what I would say, too, is that these meetings are not constrained to just 1 hour. We have, until 7 o'clock. I know it makes for a long night, but we are trying really hard to keep this all on Monday nights for our own convenience, and so I would say, let's gut it out, let's do it.
Okay, Councilor Anderson.
I would also suggest, after Councilor Jamison and I got elected, we had one-on-ones with Gene also that were extremely informational and a lot more easier to understand than when you're in a big group, too. So maybe a combination of both might help out a lot.
Yes. Mr. Roanhorse.
Mr. Mayor, you might want to consider an alternative to, we'll do it any way you want to do it, but what works pretty good is if 3 counselors show up, we don't have any problems with open meetings then at that point, and then you have time to talk. It would before, we always kind of held it at 3 just in case somebody extra showed up, because we didn't want to get in trouble. And we can do we'd have to do it 3 at a time. You could pick out some times. We were originally talking about putting like 3 or 4 dates out there on the calendar, and then you could choose which one might work best for you. So, as opposed to having using this meeting, it's up to you. We'll do anything you want done, but you might have a lot more questions than you think when you start to dig around in it. It is different.
Gene,
You'll see a little bit of it today. I'm going to take a little bit of in my report. We'll do a little bit of a training session.
Maybe if you could give us a few dates, work with Deborah, and the rest of the counselors could then coordinate a time to get together with you. Maybe at the end of all of those, you could come back and give us a summary. I think maybe some of the intentions of Councilor Erpenbach was to explain that process a little bit as well to the public. So maybe after we do some one-on-one stuff, you could come back and just summarize it. Would that be okay?
That would be wonderful. You know, some of us did do the League of, or the Municipal League training, which was also very good, but, you know, sort of that broad brushstroke of the process, and it was helpful. But some of us have also come off a campaign where we have people still asking us, what is that about and why is it so different? And people want government to run like a business. I really do think that it's helpful, not just for us as a council, but for the city as a whole, for our voters and our constituents. So I like the combination idea, though.
I think the biggest separation is that not-for-profit thing. Kind of confusing. Government, we're not here to make money.
You get your arms around the idea you really aren't dealing with a profit. So it's not a motive in government.
Okay, very good. Anything else for Gene? Or okay.
Just like my house.
You know, a couple other thoughts I just want to share. I hope everybody was able to receive our leadership notes from the meeting we had Thursday with the mayor in the email format. We're probably just working through this whole process of, you know, creating a document that works for everybody in a timely fashion so that we're all aware of what we're discussing during that meeting. We can either reiterate those details in this meeting or just rely on you to respond to the email if you have questions or concerns or comments. But certainly feel free anytime you want to say anything at this meeting. This is your chance. But just another item that I wanted to cover is we wanted to try to make sure we set up our priority list for Sue and I to bring to the mayor's office when we come on Thursdays to kind of go over what's hot on your agendas so that the mayor is informed as well. So maybe, I'm not sure how to start this process, but look for something from Sue and I to get a little feedback from you prior to Thursday's meeting with the mayor so that we have an agenda as well. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? Okay. Let's move into our Councilor Aguilar.
Are we going to discuss at this meeting the process as far as the approval process for advice and consent for the mayor's?
Oh, we sure can if you'd like to discuss. I think there is some questions maybe about how this process is handled, and I think it's been done differently over the years, but maybe it actually has been done in one way, but the Mayor Huther is elected to try maybe a different approach. In the end, we need to know that it's up to us on how we want to handle this. If we'd like to separate each department head out and approve them by individual resolutions, we can do that. If we want to lump them together, we can do that. I think this is certainly our time to have this discussion.
I
Councilor
would
Brown.
just be interested in hearing from the mayor about why lumping the reappointments together.
Okay. Mr. Huther.
Thanks, Councilor Brown. And maybe for the sake of the people of Sioux Falls, here's what happened today. What I want to do is there are two department heads that I would like to replace, and two of them, and these two need to be approved by the City Council, and that's advice and consent. Then there are two others that I'm also going to replace. Because of the size of their department, they do not need the advice and consent of City Council. But then, one of the other things that happens in city government is that if you don't, by a certain date, reappoint people, there's another process that takes place. I decided, at least in the spirit of trying to bring a little calm to city government, I decided to reappoint the other 8. And so what I did is I presented to City Council individually that I want to appoint a new city attorney by the name of Dave Fifley, and they will certainly have the opportunity to review that. I also wanted to appoint Jill Franken as the new department head for public health, and the City Council will have an opportunity to do that. And then on the reappointments, what I did is I just submitted a document saying, here are the 8 people that are currently employed as department heads within city government, and I would like you to consider reappointing or allowing me the opportunity to reappoint them. So I submitted that document as well. There's really nothing probably too scientific to it other than the 8 was just these people have been working here. You know them well. If you feel that they should not be reappointed as a team, certainly we can talk about that. But I just thought it would simplify the process.
Yes,
I think our main concern is that we just have, again, open dialogue with these folks, even though they are people that for the most part we know them. I think that I like that precedent of doing them individually. I like that idea that we can have a conversation with them, even just for a few minutes. I mean, that's part of that advice and consent process for me. For the new folks, and one of them, of course, is someone that we know quite well, but for the new folks, I think, too, that they're just a brief question and answer type thing. I don't think anyone's looking for a long, I mean, as I said to Sue the other day, we're not looking for Senate hearings by any means, but really just, again, those open conversations between the council and directors. I don't know what that process is, but...
And I'd urge you to do that. I think that that's the proper thing to do. And you can certainly talk to any of the, if you want to, the night of the reappointment vote, if you want to, call up any of the 8 at your discretion, ask them any questions that you may have, and go for it. I think that if there is one of the 8 that you really have reservations of, then I probably urge you to talk to me about that so that we don't make it quite as public in terms of grilling the individual here before at least we have an opportunity to talk about, what are the reservations of that man or that woman. But no, they'll all be here for you to talk to, and I'd urge you to do so.
Yes, Councilor Brown.
I would prefer to have them separate as well, because in the past we've done this. There have been questions on some of the reappointments, and the votes have not always been anonymous, and it makes it difficult if any one counselor has an issue with any one of the group that is grouped together. It makes it difficult for them to vote and express their concerns about that one position, and it isn't uncommon to not have an unanimous vote in those. So that's why I would urge you to keep them each separate.
Any other comments, feelings?
The mayor's, I've got no issue with that. Deborah, if you want to write up the 8 the way that you believe they should be done, that's fine. It is the city council meeting. It's your meeting. If you want to write them up so that it meets the requirements of city council, and then you'd have the opportunity to vote on them individually, I think that that's just fine.
Okay, Councilor Intamin.
Yeah. Deborah, if you could just tell us again, because some of the departments have, what is it, the number of employees that they have? 5%. Yeah, and we're required to vote on them individually. Is that not correct, Deborah?
Yeah, the direction of the mayor, this appointment or advice and consent with the appointment of the mayor, that's spelled out in city charter. It's section 4.01, subsection D, where there's 2 criteria or 2 thresholds. One is that 5% of the city employees or budget. And so you have employees or budget or both. And so that's why 2 of them don't need to be reappointed by the council. Those are actually under that radar, and the other 10 are above it. So.
Councilor Endemann, too, I apologize. One thing, too, you should be aware of, just because the mayor reappoints the department head does not mean that they need to stay there for the term of that mayor. The mayor, she or he, can at any time also recommend to bring in some new blood. So you should be aware of that too, as well as the people of Sioux Falls should be aware of that too.
Okay, anything else? I don't see anything. Let's move into our presentations. We'll start off with Gene Roanhorst with our financial report. Gene?
Gene Roanhorse, Director of Finance. We're looking at this in two stages. What we're going to be talking about today is the month of April. We also have the May financial statements, and we will be presenting those in the next council meeting, and then we'll be caught up again. So I hope everyone has their monthly report, because we're going to look at it a little bit closer tonight than we usually do. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, does everybody have a copy? Maybe they didn't bring one, or let's, Jamie, if Deborah, make sure they're, okay. It's online. If you have your computers with you, you could sure grab it offline. Or let's get another copy in front of everybody before we start. Maybe we just have a little intermission, or is there anything else maybe you could cover with us that's not quite so...
Oh, no, all I've got is this for tonight.
Gene, do you mind sticking around if we switch over to the audit reports?
That'd be fine.
Could you do that? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's switch over to our, well, first let's, yeah, Don, if you're ready, let's go to Don. Don Kearney is going to talk to us about revised recreational and facility fees.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. Don Kearney with Parks and Recreation. Today we have some proposed 2011 fee increases and one additional fee that we're proposing with the understanding that none of these fees would go into effect if you should decide to approve them until January 1 of 2011. The areas that we're looking at are regular priced season swim passes, the daily admission fees at our aquatic facilities, and our volleyball and kickball leagues, and then the new fee that we are proposing is the shelter reservation fee. The history of the fees have not been adjusted for swim passes or daily admission fees for the last 10 years. The league fees were last adjusted for volleyball in 2003, and then historically the city has not charged for shelter reservations, and we do approximately 2,000 reservations each year. Reasons for the adjustments obviously allows us to increase our fees to reach the lower end of what other cities across the state of South Dakota charge, as well as some of our other peer cities as far as our comparables go, so you can get a feel for what other communities are charging. And obviously it allows our participants to help offset the cost of providing those programs. One of the things that's important for us to understand as we present this proposal, that there are no changes proposed for free or reduced swimming passes. So those folks that qualify for those passes will not be impacted by any of these fees. We took quite a bit of effort to avoid increasing fees more than 50% from their current charges. One of the reasons why we're proposing some of the fees at their current rates, it's been a long time since we've adjusted rates. The proposed that increases our target at those programs that are significantly below the benchmark cities that we have out there. We have lots of other fees that we charge, but we feel those in the current state are at an acceptable level. And then in the future, it'd be our desire to try to do more incremental increases versus one-time large increases, so we don't get into the huge percentage of increases by waiting 10 years. The first slide shows how we compare to other cities with regard to family swim passes. In all of these graphs, you'll see that our fees are on the far right-hand side of the graph. The fee that we currently charge is $50, and what we're proposing is to increase those fees to $70 for a family swim pass. You'll note that Huron was out of all the cities that we survey, had the lowest, and that would bring us up to where they're at. Yes?
On these passes for these family swim passes, are these outdoor pools, or are some of these indoor pools?
These would just be for outdoor facilities.
Okay, thank you.
The next fee would be our adult season pass. We currently have a fee of $30. We would propose to increase that to $45. Again, you can see the other communities that we surveyed there. The child season pass, historically, we've kept that very low to make sure that our facilities were accessible to children. And so we're proposing to increase that fee from $10 to $15. You'll see that's significantly lower than the other communities across the state. The senior swim pass, we would raise from $20 to $30. Again, you can see the other comparisons. The traditional pools, this is the one area that we do increase more than 50%. But you'll find that going from $1 to $2 is still lower than the other communities that have traditional pools. And I should define traditional pools. Traditional pool in Sioux Falls would be Frank Olson, it would be Spellerberg. It would be those facilities that haven't been upgraded to like a Laurel Oak or a Terrace Park or Drake Springs. So that's how we define that. The other one is our aquatic center fee, daily admission. It would go from $2 to $3 as proposed. Again, the comparisons are also shown there for the other communities. The adult season pass would go from daily admission would go from $3 to $4. And you'll find that that's pretty much what a lot of the other communities are charging. The senior pass, or senior daily admission would go from $2 to $3. And then now we're into our recreation programs. The current fees that we are charging for sand volleyball is $50. We would propose a $75 fee. You'll notice there are some asterisks on some of the communities that charge. They're significantly higher because they actually provide officials. We do not provide officials, and so that's the reason why they charge more. But if you compare ourselves to the cities that actually don't provide officials, you'll find that we're on the lower end of the scale. Indoor volleyball, we have quite a number of teams in that particular program. Our current fee is $85, and again, you'll note that the asterisks on those communities are actually providing officials. We will not. And we would propose a $125 fee to match what Aberdeen is currently charging. Kickball, a very popular program. We currently charge $50. Again, we do not provide officials and would propose a fee of $75. And then a new fee that we're proposing is a $25 fee for a shelter reservation. That would be very comparable with Sioux City and Mitchell charge currently. And it's a fee that I think you'll find most larger communities across the country charge for. It's not something we've charged historically, but we are recommending that as a new fee for 2011. To kind of give you some statistics for you to look at, I certainly don't want to go through each and every one of these, but I think it's important to draw some points out about the numbers that you see on your screen. In 2009, we sold 2,550 family passes, and in 2009, we actually dispersed more free passes than we actually sold in 2009. And so those passes are for those that actually have the EBT card. Those are the free passes. If you have one of those and you're a Sioux Falls resident, you qualify for a free family pass. And so I just leave the rest of the numbers for your review. The next slide is intended just to give you an idea of how many teams we have in our programs. Current indoor volleyball program, we have 319 teams in those programs. And then our summer sand volleyball has 52, and then our kickball numbers are 136 teams. We have over 2,000 shelter reservations, and this is the anticipated additional net revenue that we believe that we would generate if we base it on our 2009 figures and run the new rates against those numbers. And that's a net number because our prices are inclusive of sales tax. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Don? Go ahead, Rex.
Yes, Don. couple of things. How much of this how much of the fees make up, what does that make up part of your budget? Is it 5%, 2%, 10%?
Yeah, it's, if you include the entire department budget, our entire department budget is probably about 10% of our total department budget.
Okay. Just for my information, where do you come up with the cities? I see anywhere from Arizona, Salt Lake City, Minnesota, Iowa. You pick and choose, or?
Yeah, we do that a little bit because some programs aren't offered. We try to use South Dakota communities to start with, but when they don't offer that particular program or service, we look out to those others. For example, kickball. It's kind of not everybody offers that program, so we had to call around to find other communities that actually offered that program.
Okay. The only fee that kind of disturbed me a little bit was $25, jumping from $0 to $25 on the shelter. That one hit me a little hard.
Okay.
Just,
Mr.
I don't know,
Chair.
that just, we weren't charging anything, and then all of a sudden we jumped to $25. It seemed to me there might be a lot of times there's churches and families and things like that that are having picnics and stuff, and that, I don't know, just seemed like a little bit high. Anyway, a personal opinion.
Councilor Aguilar? Or Erfenbach?
Pick one. Don, if I want to use a picnic shelter and not pay the fee, is there a way for me to do that?
Yeah. This is only if you want to reserve it. If you want to go out and hope that it's available or find one that's available, you certainly can do that, but it doesn't guarantee you that that facility is available. But
Is there some sort of expense to the park staff for having picnics at picnic shelters that you're trying to cover?
Yeah, there is. We currently go out and actually post a permit to say who's got it for what time. We go out and inspect the facility before we actually reserve it. If there's multiple reservations on the same day, we go out and inspect it in between those reservations to make sure that the trash is removed, that it's clean. If we have to power wash it or whatever, they get cake or whatever it might be on the tables or the floors or whatever it might be. We do go out and do that. And so, yeah, there are some costs that go along with that.
Councilor Brown?
Two questions on the swimming, Don, the swimming price. There's a perception out there that we break even or make money on swimming pools, but that is not the case at all. Can you share that number, what that subsidy amounts to a year?
Yeah, our total overall aquatics program is just short of $1 million for a year, and our revenue currently is about anywhere from $300,000 to $350,000 a year, so it's by no means a moneymaker.
Right, so it's about roughly $600,000
right
to keep those pools open for 180 days at best.
That's correct.
Or much fewer this year.
Yeah, it's not going. Yeah.
80, excuse me. Then my other question was, I noticed, have we seen the number of free passes going up or in the last couple of years? I know this council several years back made that policy change, and now that I see the free passes are higher than even the paid passes. What are we seeing in that trend?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just word of mouth, people being more familiar with that. But we did change the system. You used to have to go to Human Services to get a free pass at the county. Hugh Grogan used to issue those. And now they're just much more accessible, I think, and people are much more aware of how to get their hands on those passes.
Okay.
We did a couple of those. If you remember, we did a couple of those distribution days with the local service providers, one at the Bowden Youth Center, where we actually issued the passes, and the folks sewed the passes on, and they could get swimsuits and those types of things. And so I think that's part of what generated that. I think the value in 2009 was $130,000 worth of free passes.
Thank you, Don.
Councilor Intiman?
I can say, Don, that I think your staff does a super job with the city parks. There's no doubt about it. And I know struggling to get a park picnic shelter sometimes is extremely difficult, believe it or not. They're booked up significant months in advance. And your team does do a very good job. And quite honestly, I do believe that although it is, we're in the time where we have to account for all of our dollars, and I understand charging for those picnic shelters, but I guess I can understand a need to do that. It is, for the services that they provide, the way the parks are taken care of, it is really quite a plus for the city of Sioux Falls to have these kinds of facilities, so, and we've got to pay for them.
Anybody else? Councilor Landslide Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don, I too think you guys do a great job, and when I was very young, I spent all day down in the pool in Terrace Park, and, I benefited greatly from it, and a lot of times it was free back then, which was good because it probably kept me out of there. I agree with all these fees except the daily child thing, Something inside me just says, and I understand the income thing there, but you got two columns for it, but something inside of me just says, keep it at $1. And I think I'm debating when this thing comes up as to offer a substitute motion that would say that. I think, for some kid that comes out of town, I understand the free passing, and I really like that. And I was here when we did that, and I know that came at a cost to you, too. I think about some kids that come out from out of town for a week, and $1 is a big thing to them, and it might be some of the only scrubbing some of these kids get for a couple of days, and to allow them to be down at that pool all day for $1, I just, there's something that rings true to me about that. So, Don, I'm going to think it over, but I may be offering a substitute motion. I'd like this council to know that just pass all the fees except the daily child admission and keep that at $1. So, something
I
to
would
think about.
support that, Councilman Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Don, if I could add that, I've always thought that some of the low rates that we've had in our park system is one of the beauties of Sioux Falls. These rates are creeping up, and I understand the reason for the revenue. It's all pretty clear to anybody and makes sense that it just helps the bottom line. Tell me, if we didn't adjust any of these rates and you had to hold the line on your budget, what would you do, or how would you cut services so that we would not have to impose these additional fees on citizens?
It's a somewhat difficult question to answer, primarily because we haven't got our final budget numbers. But I think as a general statement, I think over time it's going to get more and more difficult to provide the quality and the level of services that we currently provide without being able to generate additional fees. I think, obviously, the economy, we're not sure where that's going. And in order to be able to continue to offer the services that we provide currently, that people have come to expect and enjoy for decades upon decades, I think it's important that we try to do what we can to try to charge a fee that I believe most people believe is reasonable and affordable, especially when you factor into the number of free programs that we currently provide. But I'd tell you that, that's the $175,000 is several days of swimming pool operation. It's our entire summer recreation program offerings as far as our playground program and our summer theater program. That buys us a lot of services, the $175,000. And so not knowing where we'll ultimately be 1, 2, 3 years down the road as far as the economy goes, I certainly think anything we can do that the council would feel is reasonable would be helpful to the city.
Let me just maybe say it another way and just be crystal clear on it. The level of service that we've enjoyed and experienced over the years would diminish if we did not raise the rates.
I believe in time that would be a true statement.
Okay. Councilor Litz.
Well, Mr. Chair, that would be true unless this council and the administration decides to take action, and what we'd be actually talking about here is that horrible word subsidy. But this is a quality of life thing here, keeping these pools going, and I, for one, don't mind appropriating funds or trying to talk Mike Huthers into, his administration going ahead and making this right. I mean, that's the reality where it's at. Like I say, Don, I support all these increases except that $1 a day for the kid, the single pass thing. So I think if we got to dig up dough, we're not talking about, a whole lot of money. And I realize things are tight here these days, but this is one thing that I'd be pretty adamant about supporting, Don. So.
Councilor Aguilar.
Come on. Start throwing things now.
I got to get name tags for you guys. Councilor Erpenbach.
Don, there are other things that you're doing in your department to make up for the deficit that you faced this year and you might be facing next year. Do you want to talk a little bit about those things? I mean, one of the things that we ask all the time is, why do we mow so often? Those sorts of things. Can you kind of answer those in general?
Yeah, our approach in 2010 is to try to reduce services slightly in many areas, rather than completely eliminating programs. One of the things that we're doing is reducing the number of sites that our playground program attends to the different park areas, those areas that are least attended, to try to minimize the impact on the community. The pool hours obviously have been reduced from 8 to 9, or 9 p.m. to 8 p.m. as far as the closing time. We delayed the opening by 4 days to try to target those times of the year and hours of operation that have typically been the least attended, to try to minimize the impact on the taxpayer as much as possible. Obviously, maintenance and operations, that is where, while these fees and these programs are much more visible to the community, the actual bulk of our department budget is in maintenance and operations. And so we're working hard to try to extend the life of our equipment further than we have in the past. We're trying to find efficiencies in how we get programs and services done. We've called upon our partners, whether it be the special event organizers or the sports organizations, try to assist us in some of the services that we provide, and try to fill in for us, so to speak, but because we have reduced the number of seasonals that we've hired historically. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do.
Thank you, Councilor Erpenbach. Anybody else? Don, anything else you need to add?
No.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
I think if we could switch back to Gene, we'll go over the financial report. Everybody's got a copy in front of them now? Okay.
Okay. What I want to do is just walk through this monthly report with you, not so much as for the content of it, but the layout of it and what it is for this time around. So really, in April, there's not a lot of happening at that point, and so there's not really a lot to tell you for the month. So if you take your report and open up, just flip back the first page, you'll get this piece of the report. And what it is kind of a layout of how the report works. These two pages rarely change, if any, unless something new is going on in the report. We've changed something in there, but normally these two stay the same because what they are is their definition for you. So if you go down and read through the different highlighted black items, it will tell you a lot about what's in the rest of the report. For instance, there's fund summaries, and you'll see those later on where we try and summarize in a succinct manner what kind of information we're trying to communicate. Then you have the general fund summary. Well, the general fund is the big one. That's the one that, when we're talking, 90% of the time, that's what you're going to be talking about is the general fund. A sales and use tax summary. You'll see what that is, but that'll give us a brief look at how the sales tax revenue looks both historically and going forward. So just take a look at that this evening when you want some good reading, and walk through this a little bit. You'll see in here is talking about different funds. You have the general fund and the CIP fund, and then what they call internal service funds. We've got, I believe it's 27 different funds, and those funds tend to be very standalone, very much what I refer to as a silo. Not much happens between funds. It does occasionally, but it's rare. Normally, it's all done within a fund, and it does not. So revenue coming into one fund, you will not see revenue from that same operation showing up in another fund. They stay pretty well independent of one another. The capital program gives you some sense of how we've sliced and diced, and this is where items, you see capital program in items 8, and then items 9 through 12 and 13 through 15. At the request of the council several years ago, we changed this around, so we've sliced and diced the CIP program 2 different ways, so you can get 2 different cuts to it. And where that gets a little interesting is in one, you see the actual CIP fund, the first one, with the projects, with the departments and the funds. When you go to the next one, they spread that out, and we do it by fund. And one of the interesting things happens, a lot of your CIP projects that you'll see, in fact, most of them, have money coming from more than one fund. And that's the way you only get it. That's the only way you really get a really clear shot of what a project looks like. We keep a page in here for you for debt. That always seems to be a hot topic. Not a lot happening right now. I can say we will most likely be doing a bond refunding probably sometime around an August-September timeframe. And what that means, we've got an outstanding bond that we can refinance it and cut a lot of interest cost off. The interest rates, we can pull them way down by going through what's called a refunding. And we'll be doing that. Actually, it's probably going to be worth somewhere in the area of in excess of $800,000 for us that we can pull in over a 5-year period. So that debt page, it changes every month because we're making payments on loans that are outstanding, and we have new ones coming on. If you see that, we'll look at that a little later on. Most of our funding right now is coming from the South Dakota SRF loans, and what they do is they're special loans that are eligible to municipalities in South Dakota, primarily for water and water reclamation, and we'll touch that in just a little bit. Flip over to the next page, and the first thing that you see there is the general fund summary up in the top left-hand corner. And this is what we was telling you about, just a little summary of where the fund is at. You look at just a hair down below that title, it says unreserved fund balance on January 1, and then unreserved fund balance ending, which in this case would be April 30th. We have to have, or we've got a pretty good dedication system so that, and this is all very unique to government accounting, but very effective, it works, where you have to dedicate the funds that you got. In other words, name where you got it going, and this will go out for the entire year, almost the entire year. You'll always have, like here, we do have $35 million of unreserved fund balance. So we do have that much available to us. But out of a $120 million budget, it's not that big a deal. But as soon as we know about a contract that's been entered, although there's not been any contracts, any encumbrances, we do what's encumber the project. Then it will move from encumbered into real accounts payable, and we'll start paying some money out of there, and then eventually it moves over into where the project is actually paying for its contract and getting real service out of it. So that page is the general fund, and like I say, this is out of a $337 million budget, $120 million of it is in that fund. The next page is the sales and use tax fund. Now, there's a difference between the general fund and the sales and use tax fund in that the general fund, we will always keep extra reserves, and when you look back at the general fund on the cash balance and that, you can see we've got some percentage goals there. Unrestricted cash balance of the budget of 11%. That's as low as we ever want our cash to go. And as you know, there's twice the catch that we have. We get 2 chunks of money in twice a year, and that's a property tax. So what's happening is we've got to run a 6-month cycle. When we get a our property tax in about, what is it, May, I guess it is. That's got to last us for 6 months until the next jump comes in. And so you'll see this thing going up and down dramatically, getting up in the 25-30% when the property tax money comes in. It will bottom out somewhere around 12 to 15%, and then it'll pop back up again. But the difference between these two funds is we keep these reserves in the general fund like that. In the sales tax fund, we don't keep any reserves. We run with the second penny fund, and when the money runs out, we stop building it, whatever it is. So it is managed that way. There's never really any leftover reserves in the CIP fund. We run it down to zero. This one, you'll see there was an exception from last year. We carried forward $1.2 million, but again, in considering the size of the CIP fund, it's not significant. Then the next page that we pay a lot of attention to, and there's some argument whether we should or shouldn't, it's the sales tax and how it's received and how much we're getting, and this is the one that really came up and bit us last year. The bottom fell out of the retail market, and it showed up on this page big time. But that's an analysis of the sales tax, so you can get some sense of what's going on. Then the next page 4, 5, and 6, that is a number of individual funds that are in there for unique reasons, and each one has right up at the top underneath its title, it has an explanation of what the information is for, or what's in this fund and why it's kept as a separate fund. And they can go from some pretty good size funds down to some that aren't very significant. We got the Cottom Memorial Fund, a whopping $3,200, all the way up to our regular general fund. So that, if you look, this is a summary of each one of these funds that are out there. And then when you go over to page 7, what you do is you see our 5 what we call enterprise funds. And these funds are unappropriated. There is simply a plan put together, but since they are an enterprise fund, they don't have to be appropriated because they are run very much akin to a business. We have money that's coming in as revenue, and we have expenses that we're incurring, and the revenue obviously has to be more than the expenses that you're incurring. And that's why it's called an enterprise fund, and they're not appropriated because you have to balance the two out eventually. You can run unobligated fund balance up and down, but in the end you have to have enough money coming from your revenue to pay the expenses of the fund. In these cases, we cannot just go transferring money between these funds. There's rules to that, and in our case, we do not, or rarely, very rarely, transfer funds between these enterprise funds. There's some municipalities that use their enterprise funds to actually pay for operation of the city. They put it into the general fund. Well, if you put money into where it's a taxable fund like the general fund, then you'd have to go through the process of appropriating the funds and that there. We don't do that. We're a cost-based system, and whatever it takes to get water out to our customers, that's what we get, no more, no less. And then, as I talked about earlier, we have there's on page 8 is the first cut of the capital program, and it's done by department. And then you go over to the next pages, you see that gets a lot longer because we break it out in there by programs and projects and things like that. It runs for, what is it? It runs over to page 13. And then on page 14, we take our last cut at the CIP. So you've got several different ways of looking at the CIP. Sometimes, probably the most popular one is the one that starts on page 9, because it does list individual projects, and council members tend to have an interest in particular projects, especially if you're not at large, if you're a district that you're representing. You can find your projects on these pages. And then the last page to look at is page 6.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Before we move on here? On page 9, something that I think a lot of us have talked about is the railroad relocation program. About two-thirds of the way down on page 9.
Yes?
Okay. On this, it says highlight projects that have sales tax budgeted to be identified as held back. So it would only be the ones in gray, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. If you want to know what's all held back at this point, you can just go by those gray line ones. And the last page I'll draw your attention to is page 16, which is our total outstanding debt. Now, what this page doesn't do a good job of is really, sometimes it doesn't tell you where the money's actually coming from as far as which fund it's coming out of. But it does tell us where all of our outstanding debt. So this, if you look down about 3/5 or 2/5 of the way down from the top where it says business type, these are primarily our enterprise funds. And you can see the water and water reclamation are the two big ones. One of the reasons we do these loans, we basically have a policy at this point. It's my own self-imposed policy. If we're going to borrow any money, and in fact, if we can borrow money under SRF loans, we will do so. The reason is we get the money for 2.5% for 10 years. So what you're doing, the net effect of that kind of deal is you're letting the citizens of Sioux Falls borrow money that you'd have to raise some other way, and they can borrow money at 2.5%. That's the net of what the citizens of Sioux Falls are doing. Otherwise, you'd have to find that money somewhere else, and you'd be paying for a 10-year bond. You'd be paying 3.5% to 4% today for that. So you get it for 2.5%, and besides that, the people in Pierre are very easy to get along with. So. And then, another little document, there was some talk, we talked a little bit about the movement of items within budgets and that kind of thing. Right here is the budget that originally started out with, and then we did all our carry forwards and carry backs and encumbrances, and you end up with a new budget. These are all the transactions. It's a listing of the ones that we talked about last week. It's just a listing of those so you know what changes have been actually made to the budget, if any, in the process. So that is my report for this time, and we'll have a little more financial information in the report next week.
Any questions for Gene? Councilor Erpenbach.
Can you talk a little, or maybe there's no answer to this, but I find frustration, and I know that I hear it in your voice too, when we talk about when the sales tax payments come back to the city from the state, that we can't tell all the time when that's going to be. Is there a way to change that process, or is that dependent on the current administration?
Well, as I said before, we've failed miserably at being able to get an answer to that question. We have been out to Pierre, sat with the Department of Revenue, and we thought we had an explanation a couple of years ago, and we did not have an understanding of it. This last one is probably the prime physical evidence we're 6 days short on our revenue for the month. Nobody can explain that. Or I shouldn't say nobody can explain it. For whatever reason, we don't seem to be able to find the person that could explain it.
You know, I guess from my standpoint, that would be something that I would hope the mayor and the council could, I mean, let's lobby the new administration. This has to change. It's my understanding, and I don't claim to be an expert on this, but I have done a little bit of historical research on it. It's my understanding that it does depend on the administration, that some administrations are more friendly to the cities when it comes to sales tax. And, you know, I don't want to besmirch anyone at this point, but I think that we need to take a proactive stand on making this happen on a regular basis, so it's not so hard for citizens to understand, and it's not so hard for you to deal with. You know, so that's where I'm at. I would hope the mayor would lead us in that.
Councilor Rolfing?
Gene, by saying 6 days short, you don't mean they're withholding 6 days, you mean they waited 6 extra days to pay us.
We have 6 days less revenue than we did a year ago for that same time period. The time period, instead of being 30 days, it was 24.
And that should be made up this month?
Oh, yeah, it'll be made up. we're expecting to see a big spike.
Yeah, right,
You know,
that's what I
it's-
read. I just wanted, when you say short, that short is a, okay.
We get our money. It's just a matter of when we get it.
When we get it.
And when you're in the financial situations that we're in now with the markets and that kind of thing, frankly, we would like to know on a daily basis. Or at least I would, and I know the mayor came from a place that works basically like that. We'd want to know on a daily basis. It could even be a couple times a day.
Yeah, it would seem to me that that could be done very easily.
Like I say, we have failed miserably up to this point of trying to do that.
Yeah, I'm not blaming you, I'm blaming Pierre.
Mayor Huther?
Councilor Jameson and the rest of the city council, and Jim, you specifically, coming from a business background, this is running one of the most frustrating parts of my new job, is trying to evaluate the numbers and trying to make them simpler, more transparent, easier to compare and contrast, trying to figure out trend lines. Are we doing good? Are we doing bad? It's very challenging. With your help, I think we can make this better. Let me start with the fiscal committee of City Council. If you could evaluate this document and also give us recommendations on what is good and what's kind of just baffling you with I better be cautious, just baffling you. That's number one. Number two, how do we present this information to the public? We've got people in the audience that don't know what we're saying, and we definitely have people in Sioux Falls that have absolutely no idea what we're saying. And I wonder if there's a way that we can either get this on the screen or make it more open to the public, because there are no secrets here. What you should know, they should know. I also think that in business you have an executive summary every month. At a minimum, we should provide all of you with an executive summary. We should provide the people of Sioux Falls with an executive summary, because Gene and his team, they have the expertise to look at, we see something bad here. We see a trend we don't like. They should be able to share that with you and with the people of Sioux Falls. Or if there's good news, here's good news. Here's a trend that we do like. Here's, even a comparison. When I looked at this document for the first time, I just wanted to compare 08 with 09 with 10, and you're going, there's nothing here. To me, if you want to hide money, it's a perfect way to do it, because you can't analyze it the way that it is today. And again, I think that this is June. Yeah, we're in June. Thanks, Gene.
Yeah.
We're in June. But I can't really compare how we're doing as a whole in terms of the revenues, the expenses. And these documents, they are very complicated. And I know there's some people in the audience who actually care about these things. And they're not very simple or easy to read. And then Councilor Buck, you're right. how do you as a city, with a $337 million budget that is so dang reliant on sales tax revenue, how do you manage a big company like that when you can't get consistent numbers? It's insane. But I've only been here 34 days. Gene knows that it just seems unusual to me. It's unusual to him, and it has been. And he's been teaching me why it is this way. We are going to try to change it, but I'm going to need your help too. And so if you want to change it up, let me know, because I want to change it up. And we're going to have to bring some business acumen into it, some common sense. Councilor Jameson, thank you for the opportunity.
If I could put it into perspective, it would be, to me, and again, I'm not a financial person, but it would be as if my employer said to me, you know what, Michelle, for June, I'm going to pay you only through the 25th of June, but then in July, I'll pay you for the 5th through the 30th and add on to your July check. How then am I supposed to budget for groceries? How am I supposed to budget to send my child to college? How am I supposed to budget that on that level if my employer just decides they're going to randomly pay? To me, it's very similar. And if it's not, I'd love to hear the explanation, but to me, it's very similar to that.
One thing I can tell you, we've talked to other cities, and we are not unique. I think, Councilman Brown, with being the chairman of it this year, of the state organization, this is not a new topic.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, and I will ask again that Municipal League visit with the Department of Revenue. We've done that multiple times, and we'll continue to do that. I do have another question regarding the numbers. On page 1, Gene, under the unreserved fund balance and cash status, can you explain to me, between current budget and actual, on the net change in fund balance, the difference there from the $5.3 million to the $12.6, and what's going on in those numbers?
Where are you looking at?
Top of page 1 in the unreserved fund balance and cash status. Go down below revenues, expenditures. Net change in fund balance was down from 5.3 to now 12.6.
Oh, the actual budget is how do I want to put this? This was the old budget, what we started from, and and the current budget is where we're at today. So that's what the difference is.
What is drawing that down so much?
It's probably, well, given the time frame in that, it's you'd be having the impact of your property taxes being down here.
Okay, but we would have gotten property taxes in May, so...
Yeah, this is April.
That's right.
This is
That's
April,
right.
so it's just before.
So next time the fund balance should be
It'll
back.
probably be up in June. I think you got to have the taxes in May,
Okay.
and then that goes through the county, and it takes about 30 days for the county to sort out all the money there and send us a check, or a
Very
couple
good.
of checks.
Thank you.
Can I add just one other thing? I know that Mayor Huther suggested that this is difficult to read, and it is. But for those people who are watching and wondering what we're looking at, it is available on siouxfalls.org. If you click on our agendas for city council meetings, all of these items that we're looking at are available online at any time, and you can be just as confused as we are on some of these things. So.
Gene and Mayor Huther, I have a couple questions. Gene, mostly on page 1, the line item number 49, I guess it might be called, under the expenditures of total general government, I guess. Number 49, the general government services transfers. Can you explain that?
Where are you looking at?
Page 1.
Page 1.
I'm not sure. You have it listed as item number 49. Under the mayor, attorney.
Okay. Where you looking? General government service transfers?
Yes.
That is primarily federal money that's coming in. It's a transfer in. So then it just shows up that way. It's it's the general government services that are transfers that are, when it uses that terminology, it's money coming from another source other than taxation. So it's generally grants.
So it's just coming in, okay.
Yeah.
And then if I could, Gene, you mentioned that I am one of those counselors who does represent a district. You might be a little sensitive to some of the transfers of funds. And one that I am concerned about is the Southwest District, which is the best district, if anybody's confused about that. But just joking, Mayor. But the southwest side is a growing part of town. And, some time ago, I know that the administration decided to transfer funds from the arterial street expansion fund over into pothole repair and street maintenance throughout the city. And I guess I'm just a little concerned that we're using money from another fund that has been used and put there for future planning, so that when our economy turns around and these developments need to be growing, they have that opportunity, because we're there as a city to build those arterial roads. I guess could you show me better where which projects are being put off and were not going to be funded this year? Instead, that money will be used for the
I
street.
could do that. I don't have that detail with me. But we can
Councilor
get it
Jim,
for you.
if I can, maybe in the spirit of answering your question directly, so it is more open, Mark Cotter would be the right person to answer that question. We can get back to Mark, have him put together a detailed document in terms of where the dollars were, where the dollars have gone, and where the dollars will go in the future. That will give you all the transparency that I think you'd like, and I think that would help versus trying to have Gene kind of make something up tonight.
I'm sorry, I don't have the data with me, but we have got it. We have got it. I don't have it with me.
Fair enough. That would be great. The other, in I suppose the spirit of openness and all that word used, maybe just the fact that you're here, Mr. Mayor, I guess I want to share that maybe in the future, on a decision like that, including some of the other counselors, especially those guys who are talking to people in their districts who are now not going to have an arterial street project built. I think it would be helpful if you included us into that conversation and that decision. I understand it's your decision. You do not need our approval, and I respect you for that, and I respect the process. But I think it would be beneficial to all of us to come together and work together and bring those decisions as a group, so that we're not at a crossroads like this where one of us is saying, gee, I think that money should stay, but I think together we know it's a good idea to repair these roads and get them in a better, smoother condition. Please, just in the future, if you could, include some of us in those decisions.
Thank you, Councilor Jameson. I tried to include 160,000 residents of Sioux Falls during a 12-month door-to-door, business-to-business, actually reaching out, talking to people campaign. And as Councilor Brown knows, and as the other mayoral candidates knows, if there was one of the top 3 topics that came up over and over again, other than the event center, number 2 had to be fix these dang roads. I certainly, if I felt that I needed to come to you to actually find out if that was a hot need or not, I probably would have done it. But I can assure you that the people of Sioux Falls want these roads fixed. They spoke very loudly, very clearly, and we're doing it. As for the arterial roads in the southwest part of town, folks, we have a supply of land that is ready for development. The roads are ready. They're built. If there's a developer in town who wants to add a home or two in any of these developments, feel free to do so. They're there. When we're ready to invest more money in arterial streets, and when those developers are clamoring for more and more land because they they don't have enough land to build on now, let me know, let your city councilors know. But I'm not hearing that at all, not at all. We have a very, very strong supply of land that's ready for development, where there's good roads already built, good sewerage systems ready to go. So let's go. Again, I just have to respectfully disagree with Councilor Jameson on his comments, but that's what this is all about. So thank you very much.
Not in the spirit of having a huge debate here about this, but all these items that were identified and are part of the capital improvements program, they're on here for a reason. I mean, there's intersections that need improving. There's other roads that need to be widened that are not adjacent to vacant land. So there's more here than that.
And what Mark Cotter is doing is, and for the folks out there, Mark Cotter is in charge of the Public Works Department, which is ultimately responsible for not only fixing the existing roads, but also building new roads for development. What Mark and his team are doing, they are scrutinizing not only the CIP side of the budget, which is capital improvement plan side of the budget, but also the operating side. And they are trying to prioritize it as best they can to meet the needs of the citizens of Sioux Falls. And they're also prioritizing it based on what needs the most help, which roads are in the most dire condition, so that when you're driving on 10th Street and Cliff and you hear your car go kaboom, 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 or you lose a hubcap, we evaluate that and we're saying, you know what, that is a really bad road and that needs repair. So when we need to reprioritize building a new street out in the southwest part of town for a developer who's not going to build out there anyway, and we have an intersection that's just dying for attention, Mark is going to make that decision to take CIP money and fix that intersection. If there is a specific project, City Council, when you're looking at the CIP budget, that you good folks believe is of the utmost importance, please let me know, let any of the department heads know, and I guarantee you we will take that under consideration. As you remember, Councilor Jameson, in our very first meeting together, I talked about if now that there's a new city council, if you want to prioritize your goals, prioritize your top projects, if you want to take the time to do that and get that to me or to the department heads, I guarantee you we will take that under strong consideration. But again, we've only had 30-some days. I know you're busy, Councilor Jameson. I am too, along with all these good people. But when you're ready, we'll be ready too.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Any other things? Gene, anything else you need to add?
Not this week.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to some exciting audit reports. Rich Oaksel is here. Thank you, Rich.
And Councilor Jim, with your permission, I don't know what the proper decorum is. I actually have another meeting. I know I'm not a voting member of this. Would you mind if I excuse myself?
No, you can't leave. Sorry. Once you're here, you're kind of stuck.
Councilor Jameson, it's the audit thing, so can I go?
Yes, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Rich Oaksel, lead internal auditor. We have two audit reports. I know you have a committee meeting right after this. We'll try to be brief. Just for the new council members, the way it kind of works is we do our audit. We confer with the auditee organization or department to get their responses. We put it in a report. We bring that to the audit committee, which meets every month, every 2 months, kind of irregular schedule. They review and approve the report, and then we schedule it for this meeting. If you wanted to look at the report before this meeting, if you click on the agenda item, usually you can get an electronic version of it. Then you should have the hard copy in front of you. Today we're going to first look at the cable TV audit, and we have from Mid-Continent, we have Dan Nelson and Nancy Vogel, and from the City Attorney's Office we have Karen Leonard, and from my staff we have Jeff Weber, who did the audit work. So if we have some questions after I briefly summarize the report, we'll try to answer your questions as best we can.
Rich, if I could interrupt you, just so everybody knows that when the audit committee approves this report, All we're doing is approving that the details in the report are accurate and true. There's no voting here for us to either deny or implement this as any kind of a law. It's really an informational piece. And the goal is to, if we see problems within any of these audit reports, we should be thinking as a general rule of thumb, what policies and procedures should we change as a group? And think of those changes, bring them through to a committee and implement them or discuss them in further in some other way. There's no voting here or tonight or any other time, but it's really informational.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Hinton.
I do have one question concerning the release of the report. You're bringing the report that's been completed to us. It was presented to the audit committee prior to this, and they approved it. And at that point in time, then, is it released to the public following it being given to the city council, or is it just as the committee releases it? When does it hit the press, or what are expectations there? I guess that's a question I have. It would be nice from a city councilor standpoint if we could see the report, once the committee, has approved it, if we, the city council members, could see the report to address any questions, that might come about prior to it being released so that we can familiarize ourselves with the report. That's a question I have.
That's a very good question. We talked about our staff meeting this morning. In the past, what we've done is it gets approved at the audit committee, and then anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 weeks later, we schedule it for the informational meeting. So there's kind of that gap. And normally, we didn't hand it out. We just, we just wait until the informational meeting. The next day or the next day after this meeting, we put it on our website. That's what we were doing. At our last meeting, a member of the media wanted a copy of the report after we approved it, and we did, I believe, give her a hard copy of that before the council, obviously, had seen it. Now, it does show up on that agenda, and we put that agenda out maybe Wednesday before the meeting, approximately, and we have that electronic version out there on the website. If you look at the city council meeting agenda and it has an audit report, typically if you click on there, you can see this report before it gets presented at 4 o'clock on Monday. So I guess that's a question we work out. I think the reason we did that was more of a courtesy to the council members so that you would be the first to see the report before the media or the public. But legally, I don't know, once it's been approved by the audit committee, if that we can deny a reporter a copy of that report because it's been approved by a committee.
Okay.
So I guess, we kind of changed the procedure our last meeting with this report. So
I guess that's one of the questions. I know I've just recently appointed to that committee, but that is one question that I would like to.
I'll point out that typically our reports are kind of boring, or at least nobody wants to see them until they're presented at 4 o'clock, so it hasn't become an issue. But we have some reports coming up that might be of interest to the media and to the public, and the question is, okay, as soon as the audit committee votes to approve, at that point, it's a public report?
Okay. Thanks, Rich.
Okay. Okay. As Mr. Jameson pointed out, we just make recommendations, and it's up to the auditees to accept or not agree, and also for the city council to just review the information. Just as a point of clarification, there's a technical difference between the cable TV franchise fee and that open video system license, that OVS. Knology, a company called Knology, has that OVS license. They have a very small number of customers, less than 200 customers. Midco is the big player. They have the television franchise fee, and they have, I think, over 35,000 customers, I would guess. But just to be fair, when we did the audit, we wanted to audit both companies because it's essentially the same thing. The objectives were on page 2 or page 3 of your report to see that the fees were properly calculated and paid in a timely manner, and then to review some of the administrative requirements, such as insurance. If you look on page 5, there's 3 recommendations. We'll go over the second and third recommendation because they were not too controversial. That second recommendation was we recommend that Knology remit timely payments. And on towards the end of the report, they have a letter from Knology, page 10, where they agreed with that recommendation. Knology agrees to remit more timely payments. And then the third recommendation had to do with insurance, and Analogy addressed that. They agreed with that on page 10. So let's look at that first recommendation where we had disagreement with the auditees. When we looked at just as a background here, this is an agreement that was from about 2005 and through the end of 2009. There's now a new agreement in place. It's somewhat different from that previous agreement. We were auditing the old agreement. The new agreement is 2.5%, and it applies to a broader base of revenue. It's not just the basic cable, it's the other services. Under the old agreement, it was 3% instead of 2.5%, and it applied basically to that basic cable. And typically, this fee brings in about $600,000 a year, this franchise fee, roughly. We don't know exactly what the new agreement's going to bring in, but it'll probably be somewhat revenue neutral because they lowered the percentage, but they increased the services that it covered. Now, you folks as the city council members, you are allowed to increase that franchise fee, I believe, up to 5%. The previous council had it set it at 2.5, but you have that option to raise it up to 5%. So let's get into the recommendation. On page 4, we saw the definition of gross revenue. Up at the top of page 4 there, the franchise fee applied to basic cable services. Number 2, all revenues received as lease payments from the leasing of converters and equipment. And number 3, from the reconnects, the repairs, and that sort of thing. What we found is they were collecting that 3% on number 1 and number 3, but not on number 2, that was the equipment. Refer you to page 3. If you look at the bottom there, we quote it from the ordinance and kind of the definition of gross revenue. And we're just quoting from that agreement in city ordinance. It says the term also includes all revenues received as lease payments from the leasing of the converters or equipment to subscribers. And so our point of view was that they should have been collecting that fee on the second item, on the revenue received as lease payments from converters and equipment. As you can see, both Midco and the city's attorney's office disagreed with that. They had a different definition of the gross revenue under that old agreement. And you have a detailed response from the city attorney's office in your report. And then you also have on page 7 and page 8, you have a detailed response from Midco. So they disagreed with that recommendation for a number of reasons. Now, the question is, how much, if the city council were to decide that they want to go after that revenue, how much would that be? We don't know how much that would be. It would probably be 6 figures. We don't know. I don't know if Midco knows exactly how much that would be. And then the other question is, well, how exactly would you collect that? If the city council said, yeah, we think we should get that. Because under the agreement, Midco passes that on to the subscribers, to the customers. They have to pay that. It shows up on their bill. So there would be a lot of details to work out there. But that's kind of the crux of it, is we thought they should be collecting on the converters and equipment. They disagreed with that definition of gross revenue. So we just agreed to disagree on that. So if there's any questions, we'll attempt to answer those questions right now.
I have
Go ahead, Councilor Intiman.
the new agreement that was signed on December 16th.
Yes.
Are all of these things now ironed out in the new agreement, so there's a better understanding about what the fee is being charged or what is due?
I believe they are. Dan Nelson, if you would like to speak to that.
Good evening. Thank you. Dan Nelson, representing Mid-Continent. We spent a year renewing our previous agreement into the one that you referred to from December of 2009, and a good portion of that attention was on the definition of gross revenue, because the industry have changed, the number of services we have available to customers has changed, and we've learned we can anticipate to keep changing. So we tried to write a document with much more care than the previous document, and things like this age over 15 years. So maybe it wasn't the documents itself's fault, but we probably could have paid more attention along the line. But the answer to your question is yes, we believe the new agreement does address these issues, but it's also a good reminder, this report that we have in front of us, I don't think we should wait till it's about to expire before we look at it again. I mean, it should be an ongoing, vigorous process to make sure that we're in line with both changes in the industry and what the expectations are of the agreement.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the report, or we have
We're good to
another
go,
audit
Rich.
report, less controversial perhaps?
Sure.
Thank you. Question?
How is this going to be resolved? Any ideas?
Well, I guess it's up to us if we'd like to see the city attorney's office, who does not agree with us, to pursue something. If we wanted to go after this revenue that was not collected, it's a little bit of a challenge.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I think in my viewpoint, Rex, I think when you look at this, I think there's definitely some definitions that were addressed by the city attorney's office and by Mid-Continent as we go forward with the new agreement. And I don't know that if I'm comfortable as we go forward that I think this has been addressed. To be able to go back and say that we need to assess this and assess the citizens of Sioux Falls an additional fee, I think it's just a point of definition here, and I just don't think that we need to get into that. I think as long as the agreement, and if we feel comfortable with the agreement as we go forward here, I don't have a problem with that. And that's why, Dan, I specifically asked you, were these issues dealt with in this new agreement, and I feel comfortable that they were. Because the negotiation on the agreement was done by who? Was done with your company and the city of Sioux Falls, correct?
Right. And
The city attorney?
There was a committee from the administration that had people from the city attorney's office that had several services.
How, and I can agree with you on that, Counselor, but let's, how long is the new agreement for? 10 years. How long, when was the next scheduled audit of this situation?
We didn't have a next scheduled audit, but probably, obviously, before the end of that 10 years, we would either outsource the audit or internal audit would do it.
I would suggest that be closer to, 3 or 4 years.
I think that would be a wise decision.
Okay, that would be my suggestion to make sure this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
I'd like to hear from the city attorney's office.
Please.
Councilor Anderson would like to hear from the city attorney's office.
Hi, I'm Karen Leonard. I'm an assistant city attorney, and in fact, I was very involved in this last cable franchise renewal. It took 3 years to renegotiate this new contract. We started 3 years ago negotiating this, and as Mr. Nelson pointed out, the primary discussion, I would say, that took up almost 18 months of our time was how to define gross revenue and what was included in gross revenue. And the federal law has changed on this. There's digital TV now, high definition TV. You have satellite TV. That's the competitor that nobody foresaw 15 years ago ever happening. And so we hope that we drafted a solid agreement and did our best. We had an outside consultant who specialized in cable franchise law solely, located up in Minneapolis, who helped the city draft our current ordinance found in Chapter 44. And then we had our renewal, our agreement drafted as well, who helped the city draft that. The points that I wanted to pass along to the City Council, if I may, just for a moment, are threefold. The original contract that we had with Mid-Continent was done in ordinance form, and that was back in 1994, and that was a 10-year agreement, and then it was renewed for another 5 years back in 2005. And the decision back in 2005, I believe, is correct, that we knew that we were going to come up for renewal starting 3 years in 2007, that we would have to renegotiate the gross revenue definition. And so back in 2005, we chose not to amend that gross revenue definition, but to simply keep the old definition as is. The second point I wanted to point out is back in 1994, gross revenue was based on basic cable. That time there was no foresight about digital or high definition TV or all these premium channels that occurred. And I think the contract very much limited it to gross revenue on basic cable, because that's the first sentence of the gross revenue definition. And then it said this definition can include lease converter information, and we interpreted that to mean from basic cable services. And then I also wanted to point out to the City Council that in Article 18 of the old agreement, it said to Mid-Continent that they were to provide a statement of basic cable service revenues. And we felt very much that that was the intent, was to limit this to basic cable. In 2005, when we renewed their contract, we did hire an outside auditors to look at Mid-Continent's books, and they are based down in Florida. It was Ashpaw and Skolko. And they also interpreted the gross revenue definition to be limited to basic cable. And so based on those three factors, we felt very comfortable. I respect the audit committee's work, and I think they did a great job, but we were very comfortable in our legal interpretation that it was to be limited to basic cable services, the revenue from that only.
Councilor Intiman.
During the agreement that you have now, does it allow to revisit this a little bit during the 10-year time period? We can revisit these charges or how they're being assessed
Absolutely.
in the existing contract that we now
At any
have?
time, we can make an amendment. We just chose not to amend the old contract.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councilman?
Yes, Councilor
Or Mr.
Rolfing.
Chairman, why did you choose not to go back 5 years from now? At that time, there were certainly premium channels and all that kind of thing, and we were setting ourselves up for this mess.
You mean 5 years ago when we were going through the renewal process?
2005.
Yeah.
All those things were there at that point, and they were certainly pointing to the mess that we're in right now.
Well, we also knew that it was going to be subject to the 3-year opener to renegotiate. This occurred in 2007, and at that time, the thought process was we knew we would most likely need an outside consultant. This is based under FCC federal law. We needed to educate ourselves on what could be included in that gross revenue definition and what couldn't be included. And then we also wanted to, there's an impact to the citizens of Sioux Falls because that franchise fee is passed through to the consumer. Was that the appropriate time to renegotiate, or should we just wait till the reopener in 2007?
Okay.
So that
But
was a
now
policy.
we've got it in there, and
Right.
that will be coming before us.
It actually already passed in
Okay,
December.
yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Dan has a comment.
Yes, I apologize, it is starting to get late, but there's always time to do something right. The auditors that presented themselves at our business were extremely professional, they're easy to work with, we appreciate their care and concern that the discussions be open and done correctly. Also, for all these council members to know, our audit was actually scheduled to begin a year ago while negotiations were underway. And it was the consensus of the auditors working with the council members at the time to say, wouldn't it appear to a little coercive to be negotiating with them on one hand and auditing them on the other hand? So a lot of consideration was given to our position. We appreciate that, and we want to thank the auditors for the professional job that they did.
Great, thank you, Dan.
I'd just like to echo that from the perspective of the auditors. Mid-Continent was very, very easy to work with, so thank them for that.
Good.
Should we move on to the workers' comp?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll make this brief. We have from management, we have Regan Smith, our risk manager. If there's any questions, Regan is in charge of that kind of work comp program. What the city has is a work comp program, and we're basically self-insured, and we get the money for the workers' comp. It's not from tax money. It's we allocate the departments based upon their risk exposure and their history. In other words, the fire department is going to be paying more into this little internal fund than, let's say, the attorney's office, who, firefighters often get hurt on the job, et cetera, et cetera. What we found is we're looking at the internal controls, basically, and on page 5, we talked briefly about internal controls. That can be a topic that can just bore people to death. But basically, with internal controls, you're looking at reliability of your information, financial or operational, looking at compliance with policy and law. And the third aspect of internal control, you want to have effective and efficient operations. In this case, we found that internal controls were working properly. We had no recommendations. If you notice this report compared to the format of that cable TV report. This year, we're starting kind of a new format where we put kind of that little executive summary. That's a federal auditor kind of a format. So if you read nothing else as a council member or as a member of the public, if you just look at that little highlights, and then if you look at the report and you just kind of go down and look at the left-hand column and look at the bold, you can pretty much digest the report in about 2 minutes. And sometimes people are wondering if we don't have audit findings, are auditors unhappy? We are not unhappy. We're pleased that the internal controls are in place and working well, that we have compliance with best practices to contain costs. One thing I'd just like to mention briefly, because you may get asked this as council members, or maybe you've already been asked, you might see parking patrol folks downtown. They're riding the scooter. It kind of looks like R2-D2 from Star Wars. Is that a waste of taxpayer money? No. If we looked at the history of workers' comp claims for our parking patrol people, and just one or two injuries, lower body injuries, can result in tens of thousands of dollars, and those scooters are a very cheap way to protect the health of our workers and keep the workers' comp fund from getting out of control. The one note we had is in the very last page of your report, on page 17, we have a response from management. Although we didn't have an audit recommendation, we asked the department to just kind of explain why 2009 was a particularly bad year for workers' comp. Sometimes it has to do with kind of the luck of the draw. Sometimes you have just a handful of cases that can go for 50,000. And you kind of take a beating. We didn't think that was a trend yet. Now, if we go 3 or 4 years and our costs are rising, then we see a bad trend, and then you ask management what they're doing about that. But and we just had a bad year in 2009, and it was just based on a handful of workers' comp claims. So, if you have any questions, I'll attempt to answer those, or if I need to, Regan can jump in there. So,
any questions? Anybody? Rich, just refresh me, was that, or maybe Regan, the cost of that scooter, wasn't one of those funded by a grant? It's like at no charge almost or something? We paid for them?
I think workers' comp paid for that, but Regan, is that true? Yeah, the fund pays for those kind of costs.
How much
it's basically an internal service fund. I want to say, how much? 10,000 for that scooter. So. You look at a workers' comp claim, one claim can sometimes be $40,000 or $50,000 easily, so depending on it. So,
if maybe we could do something to slow down those machines so that they don't get around quite so fast, because some of us can't run fast enough.
Our parking patrol is a little too efficient for you. Is that what you're saying?
This guy's got a radar or something.
Yeah.
Keeps that enterprise fund up.
Right.
Yeah. They have to fund their costs, so they have to.
Right.
You think that's bad? They got this aging workforce thing in here, and that kind of gets to me a little bit.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm part of that aging workforce, so.
Yeah. Well, no, you're not.
All right, very good. Rich, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, certainly we could talk about anything that anybody else has that's come to their mind during this heated discussion. Or we can adjourn and move everybody to the Public Services Committee. Oh, Councilor Anderson.
As we discussed earlier in the meeting about setting our priorities,
Yes.
do you want to just start that with email messages, maybe stating top 5 priorities and
Yes,
looking
right.
for responses from there?
Sue or I will send out an email to get it started, and please reply, obviously before Thursday, and we'll quantify those, and we'll just start narrowing it down to a list that we can manage with the mayor's office. Think of it in that respect. How is it that we, communicating with the mayor, the mayor and I discussed an item that was on my agenda, and maybe there's others that you have like that. That's the kind of mindset you should think of, so that it's a productive meeting in that way. So we'll send out an email. I'll tell you this, just real quick. Vernon and Kenny and Bob would appreciate this, but from last year as your vice chair, you have, as a group, taken a huge upgrade with the current vice chair from what I did. I just got to tell you that I couldn't be happier with Sue, and I think the council should know that they took an upgrade with Sue. So All right, anything else? Otherwise, we'll adjourn this meeting. All right, we'll adjourn.